So a few words about the SPP, as we call it, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. The SPP is a not-for-profit organization which was inspired by the climate strikes led by Greta Thunberg, and it was founded in 2019 by the CPOs of Bayer and Henkel. We are a community of procurement professionals from the private and public sector who are committed to driving sustainable procurement in supply chains. And our ambassadors, as we call them, are coming from all areas around the world, all sectors, all industries. So we're a very broad community. Since we are procurement, we are responsible for driving sustainability in supply chains. So this is really about by procurement, for procurement. And our vision is that all supply chains across the world should have embedded sustainable procurement practices by 2030. And to do this, our mission is to, we've estimated there's around about 1 million procurement professionals worldwide, and we will support them to take responsible sourcing decisions and implement sustainable procurement practices to meet this, to fulfill this vision. And that means that our ambassadors take a pledge. They stand up for people and planet through their procurement decisions, and that way they leave the right legacy for procurement. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by empowering and equipping our ambassadors with best practice knowledge, with the right tools, with a community, and the confidence to lead in this area. Our main activities are events. They can be physical or online. Our Danish chapter has organized 2 events, physical events this year. And we also provide, as I said before, the network, a platform to engage industry and develop new tools and best practice for sustainable procurement. And we also have a World Sustainable Procurement Day on the spring equinox of the 31st of March. And that way we are filling in the gaps, the knowledge gaps, and advancing best practice in the procurement community worldwide. So once again, a warm welcome to you all from wherever you have joined. So not necessarily just from Denmark. The way we're organized is that we have chapters, and that way we can deep dive by geography, industry, or topic. So we have chapters, for example, on scope 3 or human rights. And currently we have 19 chapters. So it's a great way that our ambassadors can deep dive into topics and get really specialist knowledge in a particular area that is important for them or for their organization. So when you join the SPP, you not only get access to this huge community and like sustainably minded procurement professionals, you also have access to tools, best practice, events. You can join a chapter and so forth. I'd just like to say a few words about the Sustainable Procurement Pledge League of Champions. The League of Champions support procurement leadership by providing a financial foundation so that we can fulfill our strategy. Basically, the League of Champions is a series of companies who are donating yearly to the SPP, and they are represented on a transformation panel, which is developing tools and best practices for the procurement industry in the area of sustainability. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the SPP is a non-for-profit, so it's really important that we get this support from our Champions League, as we call it. So if you think that your organization could be interested in collaborating more closely with the SPP, please write to us, a link that will be provided in the chat. And if you enjoyed this webinar, then please tell your colleagues, please tell your friends, please tell your family even, spread the word, and look out for our events in the future. Follow us on LinkedIn, join the pledge, obviously take the pledge, and follow us on the SPP page on LinkedIn and the chapter page. Right, so I think that was all I had to say about the SPP. If we could maybe move on. Yes, and I'll hand over now to you, Fleur.
Thank you, Miguel. So as I mentioned before, I'm in the studio And it is with great pleasure that I can invite Christian Mand Boserup to the scene. He's one of my very favorite colleagues here at Implement. He has 20 years of experience with top-level management, discussing how to organize, how to work around uncertainty, risk, and even seizing opportunities. And most recently, he's also worked with companies on the CSRD. So I'm very excited to hear how he proposes that people understand the CSRD, the implications for the procurement department, and how to get started around it. And without further ado, Christian, please come onto the stage and enlighten us.
Thank you so much, Fleur. What a lovely introduction. Hopefully I can fulfill the high expectations now created. So I will be talking through 3 topics today. First one is a brief introduction to the CSRD, and I'm sure most of you are well familiar with the elements. So I'll give it just a small different touch. Then we'll move into the second topic, and that is, so what does CSRD mean for you as a procurement department? And again, I'll try and give it a spin, a little bit of Implement flavor. And then thirdly, how can you adapt a business approach and gain value, as opposed to perhaps a more compliance focused approach. So that's the program for today. And diving ahead in the first brief introduction, the why, the who, the what's next, and what it is. Definitely, you are familiar with the why. Planet's going to survive, but the populations are threatened, and somewhat got really tired of waiting. At least the Germans have been well known to say that we need to put the hammer down, and the hammer is now transparency in terms of CSRD. Who and when? Listed companies go first, then other large companies, and then follow the smaller companies with less than 250 employees. But reality is really that in spite of this official time plan, everybody's getting affected, and especially because I assume most of the companies presented today are fairly large companies. You are already now harassing smaller companies, and so they need to get into the act in order to help you become compliant. So everybody's being affected right now. Everybody's in the preparation phase. What's next? Well, the CSRD is really the reporting requirements from the CSRD, and there's a lot of other regulation coming up. And then, of course, we're waiting for the final edition of the topical standards, and then in addition, we'll see the sector-specific disclosure requirements popping up, hopefully later this year. What it is, you've probably seen this stack of tables 100 times now, so I won't spend too much time on it. I'll just say that most people tend to focus on the 1,144 data points without knowing exactly what does that mean. And I'll try and elaborate on what does it really mean to have more than potentially 1,000 data points you need to figure out how to report in the integrated financial report. Because there's one way to look at it, and that's just reading through all the regulation and start counting. But there's another way to have a look at it. And I think it's important to remember that all companies have a governance and a business model. And in that system, we will see topics like the due diligence process, the whole governance system, which in many companies are already described in their financial reports. The business strategy development piece, the risk management piece, and then all of the thresholds and internal control framework. And then in addition, competency development, integrated sustainability reporting, communication and branding, and product development. All of those elements are actually mentioned as something you need to integrate with in some of the cross-cutting standards and some of the general topics in each of the topical standards. So that's just having a brief moment to think about it. It interacts with the entire organization. Then there's a second element. That's what I call the engine room, or the backbone of all the methodologies. So every company needs to develop a set of methodologies that cuts across most of the topical standards, and then later the sector-specific standards. And that's, of course, the double materiality, the way that you handle risk in relation to ESG. It's called impact, risk, and opportunity. In other parts of the company, it's called enterprise risk management, my home turf. So this is a familiar topic. We need to have a scenario engine. So whenever you decide that some topic is material to you, you need to figure out, so what are the relevant scenarios we need to look at in relation to that topic. We need to have a financial impact engine in order to figure out, so what is the most likely positive or negative financial impact related to those scenarios, and write down all the assumptions and figure out how to engage with stakeholders. That's a topic that we'll return to later. All of the validation and system support. Most key people don't really understand what a big task it is to get hold of that backbone and methodology, or the engine room. Most people are actually just looking at the topical standards and saying, so for each of the topics, I need to have a policy, targets, plans, actions, resources, and of course the metrics, where I need a base metric, current level, and then of course try to figure out, so where are we heading. So that's maybe a little bit of a different way to look at it. And sometimes when we see large gap analysis, we have spreadsheets or whatever form they come in, they need to be reorganized in order for the company to actually work with it. So we reorganize it to fit into this view, and then we do the planning based on a view that is more integrated with how your company actually works. As I said, most companies are in the getting ready phase. So a lot of baselining and gap analysis, lots of materiality assessments and planning and so on. And then we'll need to develop the engine room and eventually get ready for operations mode. But now we're in the getting ready, and hence the title of this webinar. What does it need to get ready? And my key takeaway is really to say, well, have a look at this second view of getting organized. I'm sure it will help you too. Switching to the second topic of today. So what could this mean for the procurement partner? I think this regulation is really good. I don't often say that. I know lawyers love most regulation. I actually don't. But I think if you really care about making a difference, this is maybe one of your best friends. And as we talked about earlier, the 1,144 potential data points sounds like a lot. But reality is that it's 50% changing the business and 50% existing and new data. So don't think of this as only a data exercise. It is heavily involved in changing your entire business, including procurement. And of course, when people come to you, I guess the main purpose, I hope the main purpose will be for you to help them support our customers on their sustainability journey, defending our license to operate, and then avoid significant cost increases, or maybe even achieve significant cost decreases. You can expect to be asked a lot of things. This is a non-exhaustive list of things that I would expect you to be asked to help out with. Help me understand what are the material topics in our upstream value chain. Also including topics beyond our direct control. You might be able to, or you might be asked to help validate the data from the suppliers. And you will definitely at some point, when the company has decided on, so what effect is this going to have on our sustainability strategy? And for all of the policies on all of the material topics, that set of thinking and writing will at some point get to procurement, because you need to update your supply selection criteria and tenders, and many of you are probably already doing that. You will probably be asked to monitor your supply base, and if you're not doing it already, make sure to get some technology to help you do that, because we need to be much more in control of what's happening. I know many companies ask their suppliers to sign some kind of code of conduct statement, and it's probably better in your companies, but some of the companies that I've visited, they're quite happy just people signing, and then they don't ask too many questions. But that's going to change completely, I think. We're going to renew our contracts, update the clauses about collaboration, monitoring, ordering, and opt-outs, because the fundamental purpose behind this regulation is really to help your suppliers, your entire value chain, to get better and not to punish them. But you need obviously both a carrot and a stick. There's also a special focus on protecting the weak suppliers, especially in payment terms, and so be aware of that. And you'll probably be asked by finance to help document that we are being kind to the weaker suppliers. And then at one point, you'll probably be asked to help establish and contribute to what I call industry collaboration to foster ESG improvements across your upstream value chain. So those are the headlines. If we turned it into a procurement process, and I know this probably looks different at your company, but this is a fairly generic 7-step 0 to 6 step process. And in yellow, I've tried to highlight, so what are some of the most important areas where this piece of regulation will impact the buying process. And at the bottom of the slide is the most important piece. That's where I try to summarize, so what is really important to take away. So your input and effort can make your business strategy more resilient. I'm sure this, when you read into the regulation, there's a lot of requirements about documenting. So how resilient is your business strategy and your business model really when you consider all of the topics and all the things that can go better or worse? And procurement is in a really important spot to help the company figure out how can we become more resilient. I mean, some of the supply chain issues have gone away, some still persist. If you're in any way related to agricultural products, people don't think it's going to go away. It's probably going to get worse, right? The second thing is that this is your opportunity to increase the weight on ESG matters. We've been talking about this for a long time. Now people are being forced to make it a reality. Even management teams are being forced to somehow being assessed against the progress on ESG. And you're going to probably be asked to help them do that. So internally, there's a lot of things that will help you. But also externally, this is your opportunity to increase the weight of ESG externally. So helping your supplier base, both existing and potentially new suppliers, become even better. And of course, you will now be given the tough power to act when suppliers over or underperform in terms of ESG. One of my wet dreams in terms of ESG, if that's an appropriate term, is that products eventually will be accompanied by a large data set that talks about how this product actually came about in terms of E, S, and G. And much of the data obviously comes from the production of the company, but also from the suppliers that you are in contact with. Now turning to the third element, how can you adapt a business approach and gain value, maybe as opposed to a mere compliance approach? And I think there are two ways to roam. One is the compliance focus, and if you let in the lawyers early in the program, I'm not saying lawyers shouldn't be let in, but if you let them in early, it may take a compliance focus fairly quickly. And get these long lists and you need to tick them off. Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? But if you can leave them out just a little bit longer and then say, let's talk to the business and let's try and figure out what is it our company actually wants to achieve now that we are being forced to being much more transparent. And one way to do that is to build what we call an impact case. It starts with a vision, and on the next page you'll see an example, so it'll get more specific in a minute. Then we look at which business KPIs could actually support such a vision. We then look at what is the behavior that need to change in order to achieve those KPIs, and what are the deliverables we need to have in order to change the behavior, in order to improve on the business KPIs to achieve the vision. And it looks like this. It's a hierarchy and it's very small text and it's just for illustration. On the next page, you'll see a more relevant example. Maybe if you pause for 10 minutes or 10 seconds and then think about what could be a headline for me in terms of a vision to improve sustainability in the supply chain. Then I'll count to 10 and you'll have a small break. Let's assume you're now starting to formulate that vision and then you need to start thinking about, so which KPIs could actually be relevant to support such a vision. Let's look at an example. So let's say the vision should be something like, let's support the delivery of new ESG profile products. It could be that your company wants to make it very clear to the market that you can supply not only the most environmentally friendly products, but also super high profile in terms of taking care of worker conditions, not only at your own company, but also in the value chain. On the S and some G related KPIs. Let's assume we can come up with 2 KPIs. So one is we can source components XYZ with a maximum of NN kilo CO2 per unit. That's a standard KPI. Most of you are probably working with that a lot. I mean, whatever you buy, if you buy freight or whatever components, you're looking at, so what's the CO2 per unit or whatever. And it needs to be at a certain price level, right? The second KPI could be that we will only source from value chain companies that can document adherence to specific social, other environmental and governance KPI thresholds. So going back to the first topic, assume the company is developing their sustainability strategy and actually start formulating specific policies for some of their material topics. It could be pollution, energy, greenhouse gas, whatever. And then they actually come up with, so where are we today? What should our target be? So let's, in order to increase the likelihood that we eventually will actually reach those targets, what are the actions we need to put in place? Maybe we should start formulating KPI thresholds and then have a dialogue with procurement about how much can you contribute to actually achieving some of those KPIs. What can we do in procurement? What can we do in production? What can we do in downstream logistics and so on? And that is going to be a super interesting conversation. Some companies are quite far ahead, so others are still waiting for the corporate to get more formalized and better articulated about the specific topic policies. Moving down one level, let's assume we settled with those KPIs and made them really specific so that we can actually figure out whether we reach them or not. The new behavior could be something like help potential suppliers understand and develop components in a long-term relationship, and that's something that many sustainability people actually like, is for some to have a transactional relationship, but for others to have a long-term relationship, and maybe actually do cross-industry collaboration exercises or forums where you help each other to develop better components that are maybe cyclical by design, or whatever the phrase of the moment is. A second new behavior could be to conduct tough audits unannounced. So that's more in the stick area. We talked about many companies asking their suppliers to sign the code of conduct, but they don't really do a lot to follow up. These unannounced audits could be done by you, or there's a whole host of external companies more than willing to do that for you. And then thirdly, be firm, act on both over and underperformance. It could be that some of the contracts are actually, some of the success criteria are actually linked to ESG factors and not only price and quality and on-time delivery. I would love to see that last piece as a new behavior. And at the bottom, I mean, this is still just a made-up example for your inspiration. We could establish a knowledge and collaboration center with adequate resources that span upstream, value chain. We could update supplier base and contracts, and we could establish a monitoring service so that we make sure that we are in much better, not controlled, but at least we have a good overview of what's going on in our value chain. And I'll just pause a minute for you to have a second look at this really simple example of a business approach. And this is where you start, leaving the lawyers out and then go to your business and have this discussion. Is it something like this that we need to start working on, and then get the lawyers to help us, at least not be non-compliant, at least be somewhat compliant, but make sure that we focus on the business value and not the compliance issues. If we turn our attention to what we normally suggest people go through. So remember in the beginning I talked about everybody's in the preparation phase, and now eventually we'll go in 1 or 2 years into the operational mode. These are the steps that we normally ask people to go through. And my key takeaway on this is that if you believe there's something valuable in the business approach and the impact case that we just talked through, make sure that you address that now. Don't wait for someone to approach you with a long gap list and saying, these are the 15 things, Frederico, you need to fix, and Christian, you need to do these 5 things. And by the way, I'm taking full control of the dialogue with all of the supplier base. Don't wait for that. Try and be proactive in this space. I think it holds a lot of value. The companies, we don't persuade all companies to go down this, but the companies that we do persuade to go down this route is so thankful that we, kept the compliance a little bit to the side, even though they're kicking hard on auto, so that we have a business focus. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, monitoring all of this requires a little bit more than an extra hand or two. So there's so much software, and it's every month we get approached by new vendors that wants to show us their brilliance in whatever they can do. And I know this is a fairly small picture, but we can share a larger one. I'm so so curious to see what's going to happen in space, because many companies come to a point where they realize we need outside help in order to monitor and control and audit and blah 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 blah. It's simply too much to ask of our current sustainability setup in the procurement department or whatever. So let me wrap it up a little bit ahead of time. I hope you think that's all right. So we talked about, one, it's a good thing, start now. Expect to help out. People will get to you if they haven't already, and you're now in the getting ready phase and redesigning the procurement process to better support what I call the future products and storytelling. And then thirdly, promote a business-focused way and start looking at how technology can help you. I think those were the 3 main points that I wanted to come across to you today. And I hope you enjoyed it. So let's open up for questions. Fleur, can you help me handle the questions?
Yes, of course. So there's a few questions coming into the chat. And we're doing a dance here, Christian. The first one is, there's a question here, someone's curious to know how far this directive will require information about an organization's sourcing process and criteria. So will the companies have to inform about the weighing of the systems and used for sourcing decisions?
I suspect that once you let's assume we go for a tender on a specific piece of component, And you have figured out that at the highest level of the company, they are extremely ambitious about reducing the CO2 in the procurement. And we need to reduce it by, say, 25% per year. Obviously, you need to be extremely specific when doing the sourcing criteria. I mean, most procurement companies are well aware or well used to, you know, it's all about price, quality, and on time in full. But this is going to be very specific. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I hope that answers the question. Yeah, Miguel is nodding.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's another question here from Maria. Any suggestions about software for impact analysis on sustainability-related issues?
We haven't found something that is good enough, or at least better than developing small, simple models for companies. It's something that first you need to have a scenario generating process so that you can generate scenarios that are fit for the purpose of going into an financial impact engine. And we haven't seen companies, you know, that are, I think, been able to actually understand, so what's the specific financial impact for a specific company. So we're helping companies build small Excel-based models at the moment. So sorry, no, Excel.
I was actually also wondering, so listening to your presentation here, will the hunt for increased transparency hurt actual progress? What's your view?
Hunt for transparency. Well, I think some are hunting for transparency, others are trying to avoid it. We talk to a lot of privately owned companies in Europe, and they are actually more into the green hushing rather than you know, being more transparent. So I think there are two trends here. So one is that some large privately owned companies are actually fighting a little bit against the transparency, but doing all they can to improve in the back end, but not, you know, exposing them too much to any sort of greenwashing. Then there's the other trend, and I think that's what you're getting at, Fleur, is that you know, maybe we're getting too obsessed with transparency and not spending the energy in the right place. And I think you may have a point there. Maybe we are getting over excited about transparency. I saw a nice small table the other day where some NGOs listed the 20 banks and somehow calculated based on official numbers, what is the CO2 emissions per 10,000 pound deposit. And there's a 10-factor difference between the best performing bank and the lowest performing bank or the poorest performing bank. And that's, I mean, that is going to scare a lot of people from being more transparent. Hopefully they will be, you know, I mean, it's like going to the exams. If you're well prepared, you love it. If you're not, you hate it, right? So this is the big exam coming up. And some companies will definitely, you know, choose a strategy. Let's wait a little bit with being too transparent. So if for example, one famous topic in the directive is that you need to be transparent about how your leadership is assessed against certain targets in ESG. And some companies choose to say, yes, our leadership is being assessed against it, whereas others, you know, come completely clean and say, these are the targets. This is what the management is responsible for. This is what the board is responsible for, and how it affects the variable pay. So, yeah.
You got people fired up in the chat.
Okay,
Let's see if we have time for the last two questions here. There's a question from Pallavi here. Is it realistic to have 100% of supply based on RE100? Over what period of time? RE100, I'm not quite sure what is meant by that. Is it reusable energy?
Yes, I realized I'm on mute and I was talking. That's correct, yes.
It is reusable energy. So is it realistic to have a goal to have 100% of supplier base on reusable energy?
It's renewable energy.
Renewable, of course.
I guess the simple question is, answer is no. I mean, you would have to select your supply base extremely carefully in order to get to that point. And if you're a large company with 40,000 or 50,000 suppliers, I mean, no way. But you can get close. And you probably have to, if your company is so ambitious that you know that's a go-no-go criteria for someone to become a supplier to your company, then the supply base is going to be a little bit more narrow, and you have to think about the consequences of doing that. Yeah.
Let's see if we have time just for one more question. Talking of transparency, in your experience, what is state of art using science-based targets?
Let me answer it this way. So when we talk about transparency, you are always asked to explain, so what is the scientific base or the scientific methodology you use in order to develop your targets? And SBTi are quite strong on greenhouse gas and climate change. But you could also ask, so do we have science-based targets for biodiversity? Do we have science-based targets for how do we treat people in certain upstream and downstream value chains? I don't think I can pinpoint exactly what is the best practice. I can see that some companies are doing a lot in order to commit to SBTi and do what they can in terms of the climate change KPIs. But I can also see companies struggling in some of the other areas, especially in the more softer parts of you know, E4 and E5, those standards related to circularity, resource use, and biodiversity, and so on. So, yeah.
Thank you, Christian.
You're welcome.
We are coming to an end. I know from the chat that some of the slides were a little bit difficult to read. So we'll be sharing the slides. There you can also find Christian's information if you want to have a chat more about how this could look. As for the SPP, there's a few highlights I want to mention. So later today, the Scope 3 chapter is actually hosting one more webinar called The Decarbonizing Journey to Achieve Net Zero Commitments for the company Accor, which is an innovative hotel chain. There's also the upcoming Global Ambassadors meeting hosted by the SPP, which will be on June 21st. So remember to sign up for these events on the SPP homepage. As for the Denmark chapter, Miguel and I were proud to host an additional webinar after summer, so on August 24. It will, the title is The Role of Procurement in Decarbonizing Supply Chains, How to Create an Effective Supply Engagement Program. We'll have Carbon Trust talk to us about this and also highlight a few client examples, hopefully. And again, this will be posted on the SPP LinkedIn page and both on the main page and also on the Denmark chapter. So do remember to sign up. This is where you get all the information and all the great insights that we're pushing every week. So hopefully we've convinced a few more of you to join us. We at least hope that we're creating some content that you want to follow us on. Please give us a ping, a note if you have good ideas or inputs to today's presentation. We'll love to receive them. That being said, a few seconds left of today. We really want to drive this journey together. Only if we collaborate, co-create, and share ideas, it will actually be possible for us to make the change that we all so intensely desire. So please do sign up for the pledge, and hopefully we'll see you in a few webinars or online in the coming months. That's all from us today. Yeah. A big thank you for Christian here at Implement, and
thank you,
Christian. Enjoy the rest of the week.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.